Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to day 280 of Humanity Rising. Yesterday on Humanity Rising, we delved into the dreams of the pandemic. It was quite an extraordinary session as different ones of you took the podium and shared your dreams. And I just want to acknowledge the diversity and the profundity of the dreams that were coming through. I checked in with Apila, Colorado after the session, and she and the entire dream team were just astonished at the depth and the lucidity of the dreams that have been coming through our community. As you know, scientists have commented sort of empirically that people are dreaming in much more clear and powerful ways as a result of the pandemic. And that has very dramatically shown through our little Humanity Rising community. And as we mentioned, we have a course. I'll put the link in a few minutes to a course that starts on the 4th of July. And during that week, we'll be having more dreams. And there will be then a report by Apila and the dream team for how the dreaming of our community since the beginning of the pandemic has informed our community and our self-awareness as we traverse this most extraordinary rite of passage. Before we begin our program today, let us pause, as we always do, and take a moment to just center ourselves in our bodies. We dream with our bodies. Take a big breath. Center yourself on your heart. And in a spirit of thanksgiving and gratitude that you're alive at this most extraordinary moment in the human journey. Contemplate the beatings of your heart for just a minute. Thank you, everyone. And now, with an open heart and a heart full of gratitude and love for each and every one of you joining our session today, we want to focus our attention on the country of Colombia. Over the course of over a year now on Humanity Rising, we've looked at various countries around the world. One of the most extraordinary phenomena in our time is that every country now is a fractal in its own specific way for a global situation in which the pandemic is present for everyone, everywhere, climate change, civil strife, political and economic turbulence. All of us are going through it in just different ways. So when we find someone who knows a lot about a particular country and has thrown themselves into the kind of reconciliation that would enable the country to rise together. We want to honor them and bring them into Humanity Rising. Several months ago, I had the privilege of meeting Yuliana Bajarquez, who lives in Colombia, who has been working for many decades in and through the civil war that rent that country asunder. I personally had several friends that were killed in the course of that civil war. So just at a personal level, I've been attuned to the contemporary history of Colombia. She's an activist. She's a coach. She's a trainer. She has a master's degree in sustainable design and has really been working in the Amazonian region of Colombia, in the civic culture of Colombia for many, many years with trainings, workshops. She's founded several organizations that are deeply immersed in the unfolding of contemporary history in Colombia. So I'd like to introduce Yuliana Bajarquez to all of you. Yuliana, welcome to Humanity Rising. And Yuliana is going to make a presentation with a PowerPoint to just explain some of the history and contemporary challenges as she tries to fashion coherence out of chaos and humaneness out of civil strife. And then after that, we'll have a dialogue where we'll bring in the conversation and the comments that you in the chat group will be bringing into the conversation. But Yuliana, welcome.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you, Humanity Rising, and everyone who's behind this great initiative. I greet everyone that is also watching us today or in today future also. This is for me an honor to be able to join Humanity Rising to talk about, I will say, a bit beyond Colombia, but of course I'm going to speak about Colombia. And what I am most interested in doing here is also bringing what I have been doing as you described, Jim, about Colombia in the framework of an armed conflict, processes of reconciliation and processes of unity. So what I'm going to share with all of you today is a bit about Colombia, but beyond Colombia, this is just an example of things and dynamics that happened in the world, patterns we have. And I'm very interested in, and that's why I call this talk this way. I am very interested, and I'm going to share screen for a short time. So that's why I called this talk Building Humaneness from Chaos. And for this, I want to start in the context of what am I calling humanness and what I'm calling chaos. And of course, then I'm going to talk about Colombia and beyond it, as I say. So first of all, when we talk about humanness, what are we saying? There are so many ways to understand what is to be human. But I'm lover of etymology. I'm an etymology lover because I do believe that we need to go back to origin, to the origin of the words and the origin of things. And maybe this comes because I grew up with very close to indigenous communities, and there is something that has been my common denominator is that I grew up also with that way of thinking, where the origin of things is so important to build future. So what in Spanish, or from the Latin word humanity, comes from the same principles of humus, of earth, of the quality of earth. And so for me, this has a lot to do about remembering the earthly being, remembering that we are beings from the earth, about remembering, and this is something I also learned from the elders. For example, Abuela Margarita, who left us during this pandemic, but is always there because she has been one of the great women that have brought the ancestral knowledge to all these processes and also to the mobilizations. So this has a lot to do with remembering that our body is the whole earth, that we are the earth, that in our body, that we as humans have all the qualities and the potential of the earth. And so when I talk about humanity, I think it's important that and when I talk about building humanity, Humaneness is like how can we remember our origin, and about raising from chaos. I think it has a lot to do with acknowledging life as it is and embracing uncertainty and the unknown orders. And when we think this is a picture of Darien jungle, and for those who don't know what is the Darien jungle, it's a jungle that is between Panama and Colombia. I'm going to show the map afterwards, but this jungle is the most diverse jungle in the world and is hydric reservoir from humanity. And my activist and my process of working in the framework of the armed conflict in Colombia started at this jungle when I was researching about land in Colombia, and I realized that the whole problem behind war and the armed conflict in Colombia was because of the land, because this specific territory of the Darien was taken by the drug processors, dealers, by paramilitarism that in Colombia is like the right part, the civil society that has armed to go against guerrillas, told in a very short way. And our ex-president has been one of the main characters of that has to do with all these movements. And actually the first film documentary film I created was a lot about this place in particular, because it was taken, this jungle, the most biodiverse jungle in the world, was taken to seed palms, African palms, for business. And this has all to do, that's why the territories and the lands of the people were taken with arms by killing families because of business. And I'm going to say a bit about this, of course, because it has to do a lot with our history in Colombia and in the world. But first, I want to talk about chaos. The level of chaos you can find in this jungle by being the most biodiverse, and really, I have been in the Amazon and I have been here, and the difference is that at the Amazon, you have plenty of space. So in the Amazon, you see you can see, but you perceive so many diversity and ways of living, but in a huge space. Here, it is like if the whole quality of living of the whole living systems were in like all around you every moment. it is really hard also for people that we don't come from those kind of places. So when we see this, I will say that we can, in a way, embrace uncertainty and unknown orders. Actually, even though there is so much chaos, inner place from ourselves is able to see harmony. But these same words put in this next image changes. This is one picture I took from the mobilizations of 2021 in Colombia. This takes place in the main square of Colombia called Plaza Bolívar. This is the main square of the capital of Colombia. The capital of Colombia used to be the capital of many nations when it was the Great Colombia. And this is a city, Bogota, of 8 million or more people. So this central place, actually in 2016, I was one of the leaders of the peace movement for signing peace with guerrilla, with one of the guerrilla groups, FARC. And I created a camp, a peace camp in this place. And I slept there for 45 days until we signed peace with this guerrilla group. And this image, when I repeat that about rising from chaos and the importance of acknowledging life as it is and embracing uncertainty and unknown orders, I think for many people it's so difficult to embrace uncertainty and unknown orders by seeing this picture. And we may say, of course, there are differences with the last one I showed from the Darien. But if I see nature, if I see humans as nature, I may find many things that are not that different. And so when I talk about chaos, I want to here make like a parenthesis and say some words about what, and I like to take this model I bring from Virginia Satir, where she understood that here, like status quo, this is like the previous status quo, and this is like the new status quo. Sorry for my writing. And let's say this is chaos. Yeah, this part. So I always say like this is like water, and like we were in this life, we come from this previous order, and sometimes we're pulled down, or we jump this place, or we're pulled to this place that is chaos. Sometimes it's life, sometimes it's ourselves, but the real thing is that when we come here, and sometimes we feel like this is over, this is the end of things. And not only, let's say, today I'm talking about a country, but this is in our everyday life, in our yearly life, we pass through this order and new order situation. And the process of understanding that maybe there are new orders and that we can walk beyond chaos, it's a process that for me, it's called resilience. And with resilience and innovation, it's the process about knowing that we can walk beyond, because we remember that we have already lived such situations. And I stopped before starting to talk in context about Colombia. I want to say all this because my invitation of building Humaneness from chaos, it's because if we are able to acknowledge what happens in this part of the process, we may be able to build these new orders. And what we normally try to do is to go back and to try to say, let's go to the previous order. I wonder, and that's not real. We can't go to previous orders. It's like consciousness. After I say to all of you, and I know many people know this, that this window wood is green, then no one can stop seeing it of the color it is. So the same thing happens for me with orders. And something that it's important that we remember also is that most cosmogonies of the world, or all the ones I know, maybe there are some that I don't know, of course, come from darkness, chaos, and then comes order. So if there is something common in the whole different ancestral understandings of life, of the world, is that we come from chaos, we come from darkness, we come from the unknown. Our origin is the uncertainty, our origin is the unknown. And then comes order. So for me, one of the most important principles also as an artist is that we need to create. There is no way to create from order. We need chaos to create. So and from this picture I draw, that is not very artistic, but yeah, this state of chaos, this is very important. Chaos is a higher order from a previous order, but it's an order that we don't understand. So I do believe that we need to appreciate more when we don't understand. And to talk about Colombia, Colombia, as you see in this map, is in South America. So this is the top of South America. This is Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, Chile, and here comes Peru, Ecuador, and here is Colombia next to Venezuela, and Colombia, and then comes Panama. And here in between Colombia and Panama is the Selva del Darién, the Darien jungle I mentioned. You can also see it here, South America. And there is something, if I want to talk about Colombia, I need to do a zoom out. There is no way for me talking about Colombia without doing a zoom out. And I'm going to talk more in a conceptual way. I'm going to say some historical things, but I will talk more about what people hear from Colombia. So I think the most common topic that can rise from by talking about Colombia is cocaine. And what I see, and this is a great example, not because I like it, for many times when I used to grow up and travel and study in Europe, I hated, or in the USA, for example, I hated when people talked, when I said Colombia used to talk with me about drugs or cocaine, because for me, it was actually not in my cultural, it was not part of my culture. The first times I saw people consuming drugs was out of Colombia. So at that times, we didn't have the culture that was more, you could find it more outside of Colombia. And for me, the central problem is not seeing the problem. So I bring maybe not responsible example, but systemically, I think it's important to see the situation about cocaine. The problem in Colombia, it's that tons. That this is a very, 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 very fertile territory. Everything, every seed you throw to the ground will grow. Everything grows. We have too much richness in terms of living systems, of diversity, as I was saying. And so we see, or the narrative that has been told to the world and told within Colombia also to many people that don't know how this works, is that the problem about cocaine is from Colombia. And of course it's not. And I know many of you know this. And the great problem that people have talked about cocaine is the coke leaf that actually was an ancestral sacred plant. That is an ancestral sacred plant. But, and I found this, that's why I say this is not responsible, because I don't really know how cocaine is made. So but what I do know is that it's not made only with coca leaves. So maybe this is real. I found this image. I don't know if it's real or not, but the important thing is what is behind. So there is a lot of things beyond coca leaves that are part of the cocaine process of creating cocaine. And so I have to jump to Colombia in the world. This is, I just say, why are we known for? And this is something that it's very important for us to be known, or to understand the context of Colombia in the world, our high diversity. We are one of the territories, Colombia is one of the territories with higher biodiversity in the world. You can see the number one in orchids and birds, and the number two and the number three and the number four, and this at the end you can see the most biodiverse, and this is from the Humboldt Institute of Colombia, some images, but it's just to bring how diversity it is in the context of the world. And this is very important, and this is why, again, this is our context in the world, and this is why we are known for drugs and war. But for me, it's so important to understand that all this process of drugs and war, it's a process of exchange, of business, world business. And the very and most interesting part of Colombia, why not to do such a rich business by culturally forbidding and making a war against drugs. Meanwhile, many nations become owners of one of the most biodiverse territories of the world. So what happens in Colombia is that the governments have been so busy making with the international governments all these narratives to make wealth, to think of their own families, to think in a very unequal way, to think to be able to create their own richness, that they have forgot this. People, you can put a lot of pressure inside with such high diversity, plus the outer pressure. This is 1 month ago, in the center of the richest part, to call it that way, wealthiest part of Bogota, the capital from Colombia. So, and why I'm saying this, because some years ago, we used to see the people that were living the hardest situations decades ago were the only ones that were saying, hey, something has to stop, something has to change, no more. Today, it's everyone. Most of these people are young people that didn't grow up with the drug dealing narrative. These young people want education or the possibility of having a health system. And I will say this is not a problem of Colombia. This is a problem of the world. But which is the problem? The problem is that we have so high complexity, so much inner pressure and outer pressure, that how can you find order here? How can you find order when everyone is making business? This is not about drugs. This is about making war, because making war, it's the opportunity of taking biodiversity. We could be as Costa Rica. And I am one of the persons that work for conservation and regenerative processes in Colombia. But if we have all these inner interests and international interests in colonizing once and twice and ever again. So I think this is something that leads to, sorry, I'm changing, but I want to close here a reflection as one of the things that we can do wherever we are in the world, and not about Colombia, about really engaging in transformational processes, is let's stop trying to colonize everything. If we're colonizing relationships, we're colonizing families, we're colonizing everything. If we're colonizing, it's because we don't even love ourselves, because we don't see richness inside. We need to stop colonizing processes, people, relationships, and we need to start living our own origin. And such high pressure in Colombia from international interest, it's, yeah, increases complexity. And I'm going to do a parenthesis here and also talk about this complexity, for example, more in a narrative way. This is an image of last week. If you see, this is a woman. This is a box with vaccines. They too are taking vaccines to a territory. And this woman sent the image to a friend, and their friend put it in Twitter. And this is an interesting part. The health minister of Colombia tweet this image with, feeling proud of the image. And I'm not going to criticize here, because I think it's more about reflection than criticism. So many, and this shows the complexity. So the situation is enough complex, I think. What Colombia's territory, as many other territories in the world, needs to do if we want to take, for example, vaccines. And because we're in the middle of a pandemic, the eyes are put in many territories, not all of them, but in many. But to see a minister, health minister, feeling proud of this image also can open a whole understanding of, wow, do you think this man knows where this territory is? Maybe not, I don't believe. Many people can think and in Twitter, people were saying like, it's shameful that a minister is proud of the lack of state. And we can also say this, but in the middle of the jungle also, there is many times there is no way to bring, and this is not a jungle, actually, it's it's more, yeah, small jungle, to say so. Yeah, I just wanted to bring this because it's kind of of understanding the high complexity there is behind, and the inner pressures, I called. And so my invitation, telling this is also an image about what has happened in the last 2 months in Colombia. And one of the things that has happened is that the government and a part of society has been focusing a lot at the previous orders. So the previous orders need to do this: take arms, and this is the armed forces from Colombia. It's called SMAT, and these are many civilians have been killed by armed forces in the last months, and during the whole during the last manifestations, mobilizations. And also there are people from the society that of course has also done vandalism, but most of them not. Most of them just have mobilized. But what is the problem behind this? Because what we always do is like to think, it's terrible, the armed forces, and or it's terrible, the people the mobilizations and manifestations. And the real problem for me, or what we need to do, is that we keep on focusing on previous orders. And for this, I want to remember this that I said before. If we're not able to walk up to build new orders, if we want to come back here to the previous, this is not real. We can't go back to previous orders. This is not possible. So my invitation is that in a systemic way, we need to be able to see and read the emergent factors. And for me, one of the most beautiful emergent factors that we have in Colombia, and the values that we should be focusing on, this is an image of woman of a communitary pot. And from this image, I want to say that one person that was in this whole process of the mobilizations in these 2 last months, a friend of mine, she told me, this will never change, because during the pandemic, people were not even able to eat in Bogota, capital of Colombia, once, or maybe they were eating once a day. Many people. And during the mobilizations, these women, for example, during the communitary pot, were giving food to everyone 3 times or 2 times a day. So how can something stop when it is about needs and survival states? So this, for example, the communitary pots, this is not new. This is so common in Colombia and in so many countries. The assemblies, communitary assemblies, there are so new self-organizing systems that have arisen because there is so high complexity that the state is not able to go everywhere. So people organize themselves. And what we need to be looking at is this capacity, these values, this potential. And for me, it's about not only acknowledging, but sharing power. We need to step on the moment of sharing the power. If we deny power from chaos, it leads to no new order. We can't we can't create by denying the power of chaos. Chaos brings uncertainty, vulnerability, survival needs, violence, anger. And when we remember all these things, when we're in the middle of all these situations that we all have lived in Colombia so many times, but people in the world live in some moments more than in others, and some countries more than others. But when we get to that level of chaos and we face life as it is, as I showed in the first part, then, and I'm going to say something that it's hard, but it's real. Then in that moment, we as humanity remember that we can kill each other, but also we can decide not to do so. And that's the best moment to understand the humanness we are, the earth that we live within. So to finish this, that I wanted to bring for the conversation, my invitation, another invitation, let's stop being afraid of our own nature. We need to call the things as it is. Yes, we are able to kill each other, and we need to acknowledge it, but we can choose not to do so when we embrace the uncertainty and when we embrace not wanting to order or to go to previous orders. So there, for example, in a forest, when we see chaos in nature, we might not see a clear order, but life just flows onward. And this, and this is my reflection. Maybe there is no clear order that we can see, but life just works and flows. And I think this is what we need. That's why I said in Colombia, but beyond it. And I don't know, I didn't say a lot about the framework of the history of Colombia. Colombia, I don't know if Jim, you want me to say a bit more about it, or there is any question. But I think more than the history, the important thing is that we're the same everywhere, with some toppings more or less, but yeah.
Well, thank you, Yuliana. Thank you very, very much. That's been very informative today. I must say I learned a lot. I actually didn't know that Colombia was so high in the ecological diversity list around the world. I knew that Costa Rica is, but not Colombia. So thank you for sharing that. And it was also very informative to hear that with all the ecological diversity, all the wonderful things about Colombia, when the world thinks of Colombia, they think of drugs and war.
Yeah.
what, that's tough when your brand, gets a certain design to it. It's really hard to change the brand. Pablo Escobar,
Yeah.
forever live in the popular imagination of the world about what happens in, the Medellin cartel. That's world famous. There's Netflix movies on the Medellin cartel, probably more famous than any other cartel in the world. So thank you for sharing. Why don't we start? Because I think the audience would love to hear a little bit more about you
Okay.
and, your biography in relationship to what you've been describing about Colombia. So why don't you take 10 or 15 minutes and just tell us your life story and how you first began to engage with, the fact that there was political issues that you needed to pay attention to. How did you start your engagement? Tell us about, the different organizations that you founded, a little bit about your current work, just so we can fill in the texture of the vastness of Colombia and how you as an individual have interacted with this unfolding history.
Sure. Thank you, Jim. And yeah, of course, my name is Juliana Bajarquez. Why not say it again? I grew up, I was born and grew up at Bogota, the capital of Colombia. And but I also grew up very close to indigenous communities, mostly from the north of Colombia. The Guayu community. I say I have a mama Guayu, my Guayu mother, because I grew up going there at age since I was 4 years old. And I do believe it created a lot of my understanding of life. All those travelings. When I was a child, I used to travel to the territory of Colombia. My parents used to take the car and drive to say it's about to go here, from here to there, it's like 20 hours to go to this place. And we need to go in the middle of a desert in the northern part of Colombia, where there actually the Spanish during the colonization couldn't get there because there was no enough water, only the ocean water, the salty water, but there was no water to drink. So actually there is the capital of this region. It's called Rio H, that means river and axe. And the story behind is that the Spanish gave the axes, the arms, and the indigenous gave the water. So they could only get there. So the biggest indigenous group of Colombia, it's Wayuu in numbers. But something very important to say is that Colombia has more, in Colombia are more than 60 different languages. More than 60 different languages. So when I talk about diversity, I mean it culturally. So there are so many different cultures in Colombia. And so I grew up also with elders from Sierra Nevada, Mamos, with many different places. And also I mentioned Abuela Margarita because she was like my grandma. And so I grew up in Bogota in a wealthy family, not rich, but I mean wealthy, because my parents were engineers. Not everyone can study at a university level in Colombia. My parents were chemical engineers. They were working the whole lives in their own industry. Actually, with my father, we were one of the ones that in the recent years we helped to change the system, the gas systems with the Montreal Agreement. And so my parents, I grew up in a private school, but I was very close to the territories because of what I'm saying. My heart was also there. So I was all my life also traveling. And the last time that we could travel with my parents by car, I remember that a guerrilla group came to our car and told us, I don't remember what they told because I don't have, but I have the feeling of the situation. I felt the fear of my family. And I felt the fear because a woman was sitting at the side of myself and my brothers who are older, and she had a big weapon. I don't know, but I remember the cold of the coldness of the arm at my side, in my chin, here in my face. And I do remember that. I remember my mother was a friend of the family of Galan, and one of the he was going to be president, and Pablo Escobar killed him. This is one of the strong stories because he was almost going to be the president, and he had this different way of thinking, and he was killed. And so, as many people, I grew up with the memories of, for example, in the windows, we used to put tape like this, across tape, because of the bombs. If a bomb exploded, the glasses didn't jump inside the houses. I don't know if actually if that's true, because we always put good luck in my house. Never a glass was. Bombs were exploded near my house sometimes, but yeah, never a glass broke. So I grew up in that. For me, it's normal. Actually, something that very common is that when we travel, Colombians, and we are in other places of the world, and when we hear like boom, something exploding, that maybe it's a building, something normal, we always used to think it could be a bomb or something like that. So it's part of our psychology. We grew up, and even me, for example, people from the territories, because I was always close to the territories. And when we call in Colombia territories, we mean the rural zones, beyond Bogota, beyond Medellin, beyond the big cities. So, but beyond mostly those two big cities, I think, and mostly Bogota. So the territories of Colombia grew up with armed groups from link and from right armed groups. It doesn't matter which, but armed groups, also with the armed forces, going through the territories, killing people. Really, and I don't want to tell the stories because they are so strong that I always say I never like to tell what I have learned of violence in Colombia, because I always think that if there is something that we should maintain pure, is our imagination. And I think Colombia, most of Colombia has lost that. I say we're the potential of a country of killers, because when you grow up and you see how people kill only your family, what can you yeah. So but when I started as an artist trying to understand what was happening with Colombia, and I studied art, but when I started doing the documentary films about the land, when I started doing activism about all these forced displacement, when I started understanding that the Darien jungle was being cut for business and not drugs, for African palm, for crops of other species, with armed forces, the government, the governor of that region that was our ex-president, that were killing people just to make business from the land. Then I started like researching, and I started trying to understand what it's happening here, because we are not so violent. We can be, we're passionate, and where there is passion, there is party, and where there is passion, there is also violence and creativity. So passion, I always say passion can be used for so many ways. So one is violence. So when I started researching and doing all this work and going to those territories, I started working from the art, and I could, from the arts and from the ancestral knowledge that I grew up with. And there was something I couldn't make, that is, I couldn't communicate the dynamics and the patterns I was seeing. And I couldn't even call them dynamics or patterns. And when I got to know systemic work and systemic thinking, I understood that systemic thinking was the equivalent to art from the science. Because from art and from systemic thinking, from both places, you can work, and we can deal with complexity. And so I became an expert, to say so, but I haven't studied a lot, and I have done lots of I'm a trainer of trainers in systemic work, and mostly in applying systemic understanding of the world two processes. So I started working in the territories of Colombia, building reconciliation and transformational process from art and from systemic work. And those are the two organizations I built, I created. Meraki, that it's an organization where we designed social and human processes, and SysLab, that is a systemic lab. And I started also doing many, and for me, activism is more like the expression of the human expression. So I don't consider myself an activist, but I have done activism, and I know I have done things that really have also add to the social process, as with the Amazon, or with the declaration of the climate declaration in Bogota, in Colombia, the creation of the table, with the peace agreement, with different processes. But for me, that comes as an expression. I went to sleep in the main square of Colombia, the Plaza Bolívar, 45 days, just because of one reason: because of my background, because of my history, because of the people I have known in the territories. Because, and I have always said this, because of the bullets that don't cross my home. Because if the bullets were crossing my home, I couldn't be there. So I have raised my voice for those who, even though have a strong voice, are not able to raise it. Because in Colombia, leaders, social leaders, environmental leaders are killed every day. The Escazú agreement Escazú agreement is so important because it cares. It was created from Latin America for Latin America. It has the name of a territory of Costa Rica. That's why it's called Escazú. But Escazú agreement is an agreement for the governments of Latin America to care for the natural zones, for the nature, and to care for the life of those who care for. So for a country like Colombia, where the higher number of activists are killed, we're number one in that also. It is so important. And I was one of the persons that worked or tried to do like the lobby part of the activism for our government to sign this agreement. And the agreement was signed by the president. And then they tried to put it back down. So for example, yes, we need international pressure for that. Not for making business in Colombia. Don't make business in Colombia. That's very bad for this region, for this territory. Make pressure to a government to take care for this territory that is not of Colombians only, it's of the world, because we have a lot of hydric reservoir from humanity. Colombia's territory, it's a territory of the world, because this is about humanity. It's not about Colombians, really. So sorry, I tell my story and then I bring some stories, but this is the important part. What I've done it because I breathe. So for me, this is a living process. I am so engaged. I am so engaged in putting life in service, in understanding leadership as a process of being guided by life. And I think so that's that's where I come from a bit, why I do this. And
I'm very intrigued. You mentioned something that you went someplace and you slept for 45 days, did you say?
Yeah.
Say more about what that was all about, why you did it, what the effect was, because that's a powerful piece of activism.
Yeah, I'm going to show you a picture because I think it's necessary for the context. Um, sorry if I take 2 minutes. The oh sorry, because I think it's important for the context. So I will show the I will share um, screen. Yes,
Yes.
good.
But tell us that story. I think that would be an
Yeah,
inspiring story for everyone to hear.
yeah. So this is the story of the the peace agreement with FARC, that is one of the guerrilla groups of Colombia, just one of them, started like in 2014, if I'm not wrong, maybe 2013, more. No, like in 2012. Even 2010, sorry, but it was an agreement that was created for 6 years, the whole process. So this agreement brought people from the government, the president Santos, with the guerrilla groups, with victims, and an agreement that was called the peace agreement, was created for signing peace with this armed group. And many people were in favor of it, and many people were not in favor of it because of the historical violence that this group has also brought to the country. And so the president created a plebiscite, it's called like this. So people could vote yes or not in terms of if they wanted the plebiscite, the agreement or not. Why he did that, I'm not sure, because I do believe it was not necessary, because it was part of the political process. But he made it, and during previous to this, I'm going to show a screen. Previous to, can you see? Okay, it's charging, wait. Previous to the plebiscite, I started working in favor of the agreement so that people voted yes to the agreement. Why? Because I have traveled the territories of Colombia, because I have gone to many places, traveling, walking. I have walked 12 hours to get to a territory, to a community, many times, 12 hours, 10 hours. I have traveled 30 hours to get to a territory, to a community in Colombia. So I do know how the people live in the territories of Colombia. And I know that the smallest part is what happens in the cities. So I knew the importance of people in those territories saying, I give my weapon away. I want another future. And I knew that was not the end of the armed conflict. It was the agreement with one group. And of course, things can go well, things cannot go well. So we worked for this. And what happened was that the no won. And I remember that day I got so depressed. My God. I think I'm not sure when close people have died, but I don't know if many times I have felt so sad in my life. I wanted to really stop life. I couldn't go more because for me, the sensation of people in Colombia preferring war was too much. And many people like me felt that way. And so I drink some tequilas, I must say, it's real. I went out, yeah, I went out of this. I was in the presidential with the government of Colombia in the red, it's called the red room, you know. I was in the worst place to be. I was with the cameras, with everything, because I was part, not with the government, as a citizen. I was part of the people and activists that were trying to get people to vote for an agreement, yeah? And I had no linkage with the government, I must say that. It was just as I have done all the other things, because I believe it was important. And I started crying. I went out crying. I drink some tequilas with two of the persons, and I said, okay, this is the end. I stayed in my apartment. Some of the people I know next day tried to go together and talk and say, what can we do? We must do something. We can't stay in this violence forever. And I stayed in my apartment. I was called and I said, no way, I will never go. No way, I want to die. And one day afterwards, I took my guitar, I don't know, and I started, I grew up with protest in Spanish, like Silvio Rodriguez, Mercedes Sosa, yeah, with protest, chants, and of course, this is in my blood. That's why I always say I don't believe in the revolution. I believe in the evolution, because I'm not a person of resistance. I am a person of creation, yeah. But I have this feeling of a Latin America that has so much potential and that wants to rise, yeah. And so I took my guitar and I started singing to myself those kind of things. And the night of the 4th of October of 2016, I said, at the next day, there was going to be a mobilization, a march, the silent march was called like that. I said, okay, yes, I'm going. I called a friend and I told him, hey, let's camp in the Plaza de Bolívar. Let's camp in the central place. And I'm going to show you the picture. And he said, yeah, okay. He was like my partner in all this process. And he said, yeah, okay. So we went to the march, and I'm going to show this, and I'm going to try to be short. I'm not going to show everything. We went to the march that night, and this is the whole process. I created this kind of flags, and before, this is the whole process. This is the night of the red the red room where we were all, and this is the march, the silent march. We were a lot, we were together. This is the guy that I told him. So if you see, he has a bag. I also had a bag to go and camp. And she was a very important friend that we built it. That night, this was the central place of Colombia. This is a really big place. This is the central place of Bogota. And this was the march. So at the end, there was music, and I stayed and I said, let's camp here. And this was like the small group that I could brought together, and we camped the first day. Yeah. And this was the first day of the camp. And what was created was this. This is the camp, what you see here. And this was every Wednesday. Everyone was used to go there and be part of the whole mobilization. And was the 5th of October, and the 13th of November, peace was signed. And well, the story is more than that. The peace agreement has not been respected by the new government. And the peace agreement, even though people like it or not, it's a gray agreement. It's well written, and I think has within so many good voices that what we need is implementation of it. Those are the pressures that we enjoy bringing to Colombia from the world, because we do need to respect agreements here. There is so much potential, I must say, as in the world, as everywhere, that when there is high complexity, potential, potential is difficult to understand, but it's just amazing.
And Yuliana, as we bring this to a close here, how would you currently assess the situation in Colombia from the point of view of the civil war and the peace agreement and the no vote and the polarization? What's the current state of play? Because I know in the last several months, there have been many protests in Colombia around sort of the economy and food prices and so forth. But just share with us the current state of play in that country.
I think what we live in Colombia, it's like a multipolarity, as in the world, but where there is so much diversity, it's impossible to see as two polarities, right? But what people understand, and the government understands, and most of the people understand, it's like there were like two polarities. So there is when people can't see beyond it, what happens and what is happening is that people go to one of those two places. So you are with the society on the streets, and even though things go wrong and people are killed, or they are also responsible of some things, you are on this side, or you are with the previous orders, with the armed, with the forced arm, with the army of Colombia and the policemen of Colombia and the government, or not. So what happens when we just see this, that this wants to eat this and this wants to eat this? So we are in a moment of a society that it's on the streets, that it's not going to stop being on the streets because there is no food, there is no work. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and people don't care about the pandemic because they are dying because of hunger. So why people say, why shouldn't I go to the streets and be with more people? I'm going to die. And a government that thinks this is personal. A government that really thinks this is about, I don't like you. So a government that is using the armed forces in a really violent way. This is what is happening. So this government maybe will be able even to create authoritarianism. They have been creating dynamics of authoritarianism by denying the right of expressing and mobilization, or mobilizing, social mobilizations. And so what is happening is this, in the framework of what I already said, the drug processes, that it's only excuse to come to Colombia, many countries also, to mine the Amazon, to mine these, to take the regions, to buy the forests. So meanwhile, everything happens, people are doing business with the territory. That's the real thing. That's what is happening in Colombia. What we need to do is to understand this territory. As I said, it's not from Colombians. Understand the richness of this territory as a territory that needs to be conserved, that needs to be regenerated. We need really a lot of inversion for that. We need to put the attention of what on the possibilities, on the values, on all those values from the territories of Colombia. Women in Colombia, even though their families were killed, they have built even cities by themselves. So in Colombia, even though there has been so much violence, the narrative behind it is of living and towards living systems and towards new futures and towards transformation. So I guess we're going to keep on this dynamic of I'm eating you, you're, and people in the middle trying to survive. I'm not that, and I'm not that. And that's what is happening to survive, to be part of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's so interesting. In the United States, we're being confronted by a similar polarization, which has now become so polarized. It's like there's Earth 1 and Earth 2, and there's no points of commonality between the two, but the forces of authoritarianism are getting stronger.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's so interesting. And I would imagine, Juliana, that if you talk to most of the people in Humanity Rising about what's going on in their countries, this basic dynamic of increasingly polarized populations, in the face of which the civic institutions are less and less capable of ensuring normal political discourse at one level, but also less and less capable of providing the jobs and the well-being and the healthcare and the wherewithal for democratic civil society. So you've really described a microcosm of the world.
This is everywhere.
Yeah. Well, let's conclude. I am fascinated by your sense of the connection between art and systemic thinking.
Yeah.
And would love to have you, as we bring this to a close, just to give us a reflection and meditation about art and systemic thinking and how that can provide a pathway for the kind of world that we seek.
Yeah, thank you. I love to talk about this, so I will happily share the following. And I always describe the need the importance and the need we have in our human process of bringing together art and science. And I have to talk about science, and I put systemic thinking in that part. And because science, it's about separating distinguishments, understanding, making some into things. And it's marvelous. It's so important to understand the world, to be able to name the world. That's a process of science. But the process of art, we have lost it because we have thought it's not so important. And I think there is a mechanism of control by us losing this, because art, it's the opposite. Art, it's about unity. Art, it's about abstraction. Art, it's about what you know, but you can't call. You can't name the things, but you know them. You perceive and you. So it's two ways of knowing the world, opposite. But when you come to the basic pieces, to the center of the union of art and science, there is consciousness. And when I talk about art and systemic thinking, and why I need to talk about systemic thinking, because systemic thinking, in difference of many other parts of science, it's an area of knowledge that hasn't lost the origin of its science. Because from systemic thinking, you can acknowledge and name things and make zoom in, but you can make zoom out. And this lets you to be able to be in that union with the abstraction of art. And from this place, it's an inner place from which you can deal, as I said, with complexity, even though you can't understand it. So I love, and I bring always an example of a description of how to understand systemic thinking and art, and is to imagine that we are in the middle of a storm in the sea. And this is an example I take, and my reference is von Forster. And when he was trying to describe, like, he used to even say that systemic thinking was like magic, but he couldn't say that because, you know, but he said that because of this. When you're in the middle of a storm and you feel water coming from everywhere, you can't even open your eyes because there is so much water. And I think when we have been in the sea, sometimes we can imagine that, or with the air, or whatever. You can't even open your eyes well. You don't know where the storm comes from beneath, from the right side, from the left side. You don't even know, but you know something. You can know that you need to take that. If you're the captain of the ship, you know that you need to take the control of it. And the control of it is not going out of the complexity. It's trusting. It's believing in what you know, even though you can't call it. And this is where they come together. So the art of dealing with the storm and the systemic thinking of it, both the science of it, it's not about understanding the storm. It's about being able to lead with it, to remember, and to be a whole without understanding. So that's why I'm so in love with chaos, because I do believe I come from chaos. I am from Colombia. I have worked with all these armed conflict. I have worked with armed groups, with armed men from different groups. And I have taken the trust of understanding life beyond an armed conflict. And from that place, from art, abstraction, and from the concreteness of systemic thinking, it's amazing what we can navigate for transformation.
Beautifully put. Beautifully, beautifully put. That's a profound insight, everyone, into how to navigate really the hyper complexity of our time. You know, at the one level, to understand reality from a whole systems point of view and the interconnection between all the different parts. But then the artistic vector of how you navigate that hypercomplexity, how you discern the acupuncture point where you can make a difference. that's not science, that's art.
Mhm.
That's the dance of being human with brains and empirical capacities to understand the particulars of the world within a larger framework, and then that interior artistry for discerning pathways, pressure points, and meaning in the midst of that chaos all around. And Yuliana, you embody that. And you have spoken very powerfully, both through story, but also philosophically, about what all of us need to hold internally in whatever country we're in, as the chaos of the pandemic and civil polarization play themselves out. And we face the specter of rising authoritarianism, and yet we need to dance in the street and play our guitars and share our abundance as widely as we can. So you've really inspired us today, and I just want to acknowledge you and thank you for being present with us.
Thank you so much, Jim, really, for your words. Thank you for your art and for your science, and the art of this and the science of this space also. And thank you for, as I said in the beginning, everyone that makes this possible, and everyone that also joins and listens. And thank you for letting me be part.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And then tomorrow, everyone, our journey continues into the latest developments in the world of UFOs. Last Friday, the Pentagon, the Department of Defense of the United States, submitted a report to the US Senate on the phenomenon of the UFOs. And the man who had led the Pentagon report resigned about 6 weeks ago because at the last moment, the Pentagon decided to lie. And even though they know incontrovertibly that UFOs not only exist, but are presently operating on planet Earth, when it came right down to it, they couldn't say it. And so the report is a very ambiguous, well, we know it's not us and it's not the Chinese or the Russians, but we don't know what it is, but it's not a UFO. And so, like most governments in the world, whether it's in the face of climate change or something else, they have a basic inability and unwillingness to tell the truth and deal with the obvious. And thus, people like Yuliana, and I'm sure most of you in the call today, are compelled to go out on the streets in protest and activism to get our governments to do the absolutely obvious. And that's the challenge of our time. So tomorrow we're going to hear from the lawyer who's representing the man who resigned. And he'll give us the latest information on the machinations inside the US government around this extraordinary phenomenon of unidentified flying objects on planet Earth. So that's tomorrow on Humanity Rising. But Yuliana, thank you so much. I feel inspired. I feel more abundant because of the way you've lived a life of deep activism, but also deep integrity. And I love this notion that I hadn't really considered before of the interface between art and systemic thinking. I think that's a powerful elixir, and maybe we can have you back just to give us a lecture just on art and systems thinking for our collective edification. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Count on that. And thank you. And thank everyone.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you again here tomorrow. Same time, same station. on Humanity Rising. Bye for now.